In the previous episode, Jenna and I talked about some of the practical things that I did to keep myself organized and to keep the house organized. And in this episode, I want to talk about some of the things that I did to help Lance that also helped me.
I was always very impressed by how much Lance was a part of your organization, even in the last few years of his life when I knew you guys. You still really integrated him and his needs, not just his needs, but also his wants and desires and his preferences into how you set up your life. And so I was very impressed by the fact that he wasn't just a bystander, but he was genuinely the center of your home and how it was run and organized. So I'm glad we're highlighting that part of the organization of your home.
You talk about him being the center. His main chair where he spent most of his time was in the center of the house. He was right there in the middle of everything. And I organized the house around him. I set everything up for his needs, for his disability. And as his needs changed, then I changed things in the house. And that made it easier on him, which made it easier on me because people try to make the house look like there's not a disabled person living there, but the reality of it was Lance was disabled and he needed all of these things, and pretending that it wasn't that way didn't make it that way. So it just made it easier to adapt the house to his needs.
And I think it really speaks to him being the priority and you setting up those boundaries. We've talked about this in previous episodes that he really was the priority. And so if coming into your home was uncomfortable for someone, they didn't have to be there. You guys had to be there. That was your space. And I think you were just really a good example. I know you were to me, and I can only assume you were a good example to other people about being genuine and not allowing other people's opinions to influence what worked best for you. So I think those are such important points. And they're points that anyone can take away from this, caregiver or not. Your home needs to work for you. Whatever the details and the idiosyncrasies of your life, whatever they are, it that's you and that's your home and your space. And you don't ever have to apologize for how you set that up as long as it's working for you. And you guys were just a fantastic example of that. So this is I think good information for anyone.
Thanks, Jenna. And that has actually helped me as I move forward too, because I'm in school now. I've been in school for a couple of years, and my main living area is full of school supplies. So I look at it sometimes and I think, oh, what's somebody going to think if they come over? And then I think, well, this is my life right now. This is how it is. If they don't like it, they don't need to be here.
Obviously, when you guys were first married, it was the two of you. And so you were able to kind of split the house up to work for both of you. So, and I'm just speaking of just the practical home environment, and how you organize not just the space, but your day-to-day life. And even when you were first married, he was deployed. So maybe that home was set up a little more toward what worked for you while you were home alone. And then you'd have to readjust that while he was home. And I'm wondering, like, at what point did it transition to being focused solely on his needs or primarily on his needs? And how did you come to that conclusion or decision? Did it just evolve over time, or was there like a specific moment when you realized this has got to change?
It was when he first quit working and he was having a hard time with his balance, and he needed to use a walking stick to get around. And he was so embarrassed by that. He really hated using that walking stick. And he tried to be as independent as possible. So I rearranged the furniture in the house so that he could grab onto things as he walked by if he started losing his balance. And then that way he didn't need to use the walking stick at home. And then as his balance got worse, I rearranged the furniture more. And then he started needing a walker. And then he was having a hard time with the walker. So I got rid of the carpeting and put in hardwood floors. I just kept adapting things to his needs. And I did it so that he could maintain as much independence as possible. So I set up things like right next to his chair. He had a lift chair the last few years of his life. And that meant that he was able to use that chair to stand himself up so that he could use his walker. And same thing when he came to sit back down, he could get back into his chair and he could lower it himself. And that gave him some independence. And then it was a cube organizer that I had next to his chair, and it had bins in it, and it was filled with all the things that he could possibly need that I wouldn't need to keep running around the house getting for him. And then that way, if he wanted to work on his word finds, or if he wanted to color, if he wanted the remote for the TV, pens, pencils, any kind of other paper, whatever it was that he would possibly do during the day, it was right there so that he didn't have to ask me for it. And then I also did things, I set things up so that he was helping, so that he was contributing to the housework, and he felt like, well, so that he felt like he was contributing. I would have him fold laundry. He was, being in the military, he was very specific about how he did his laundry, and he was very neat about it. And he always did laundry better than I did. And so he still enjoyed doing that. So I would put a basket in front of him with the laundry that needed to be folded. And then I would put a basket on the side of his chair, and he would pick something up, fold it, put it in the basket. And it would take him a long time, but he just felt so good doing that. And then all the boxes that we would get, we've talked about that in another episode, all of the online ordering that I did. And I would have all these boxes that needed to be broken down and recycled. And I would put those in front of him, and he would pick them up and he would break them down for me.
And that, I mean, that genuinely helped you out. So was it more about preserving his dignity so that he felt like he was a contributing member of the household? Or were you also like trying to find things that were genuinely helpful to you that could take something off of your plate and also help him to feel productive?
I think initially I was just trying to find things for him to do to preserve his dignity, because I think that that's a big thing when men become disabled. Is in our society, the men are generally the providers of the family. And he always felt like there was something wrong with him not being able to do all the things that he had been able to do before. So finding something for him to do was really important. But then there was an added benefit when it helped me, because he could see how much that was helping me. So then he knew that he truly was contributing, and I wasn't just finding him something to do to make him feel better.
When you were rearranging your home to accommodate him, was it done in a way that he was consciously aware that that's what you were doing? Or did you just see a need, make the adjustment, and let it be better for him? Like how much do you think he realized what you were doing? Or did you guys talk about it together? Did you say what would be better for you? Like how did that work itself out?
Oh, I never rearranged anything. I never changed anything without his input, because he needed to live there. He needed to be happy with the way things were. And I didn't want to change something and then have him come out and see it and go, "Oh my gosh, what have you done?" Because I don't like it when people do that to me. So I would always talk to him about it. And there were a lot of times that he was resistant to some of the changes because he didn't want it changed. And I would just keep going and keep going. Like one thing was, after his seizures, he really needed, he couldn't take a shower in the master bath bathroom anymore because the shower was too small. So I had to get a chair for the tub in the other bathroom. And then I was worried about him having to step over the tub to get onto the chair. And I was afraid he was going to fall. And that was a fear of mine for a couple of years. I worked on him for that amount of time to convince him to let me change that to a walk-in shower. And he finally gave in. And after we got it all done, I ended up having heated floors put in for him because his feet were always so cold. And that was huge. And I think that those heated floors were actually what sold him on it. After he used that bathroom for the first time, he was like, wow, I wish we would have done this sooner.
Well, like I said, it always really it impressed me that he really genuinely was the center of your home. And like you said, his chair was in the very middle. And it was evident when you walked in that he was the priority in that space. So I think you did a really good job of making that work. And I'm certain that he knew that he realized it. So
I'm
well
sure,
done.
I'm sure he knew. Thanks, Jenna. um, One of the other things that we haven't talked much about is asking for help. And that is something that is really, really important. It's something that is not easy to do. It took me a long time to be able to ask for help because as caregivers, I think that we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to be superhuman. And I had somebody tell me, this was right around the time that I was having a hard time asking people. And they said, you're not superwoman. And I thought about it for a second. I was like, I guess I am trying to be superwoman. And I'm not. It is okay to ask for help. And I'm so glad that I finally did ask for help. But what made it easier on me was putting together a list of things that I would be comfortable allowing people to do for me because it is a very personal thing. When you're a caregiver, you're taking care of a loved one in your home. It's hard to have people in your personal space all the time.
Well, and not just in your space, but it's hard to know it's hard to know what it is that will actually be helpful to you in that moment. And I think that's something that people are going to encounter at some point in their life, whether it's changing jobs, moving, having a baby, having a sick loved one, caring for sick parents, caring for a sick child. There's always going to be a space. And for you, it was caring for your husband. There's always going to be a space where you need help, and knowing how to ask for that help and what is appropriate to allow someone not just into your home but into your life. Those are intimate details of your life. I think that's something that you really developed, and I think you have a lot of really good information in that area.
It took me a while to come up with that list because by the time I needed help, I was already so overwhelmed. And the reason that a list was so important is because when somebody asks you, what can I do to help you? When you're in the middle of, say when Lance was just coming home from the hospital and he'd been in the hospital for 2 weeks and everybody wants to know what they can do to help. I'm like, I have no idea. I am so exhausted. I can't think of anything right now. And so having that list in place so that when people asked, I could say, here's my list. Can you do any of these things for me? Or when somebody would offer help, I did not find it helpful when somebody said, and also I hear this from most caregivers. If somebody says, let me know if I can do anything to help, that is such a broad statement. And then you start asking them for help because they said, let me know if I can do anything to help. And then you start saying, how about this? And they say, no, I don't want to do that. And I had a couple of things where we went back and forth and I was never able to find something that somebody actually was willing to do for me. So I don't know if that statement was just meant to make them feel better. But I stopped asking people if they said, let me know if there's anything I can do, unless it was somebody who was already involved in our life. But some of the things that I came up with that I put on my own list. Everybody's list is going to be different, and it needs to be what you are comfortable having somebody do for you, because this is your personal space. So some of the things that I came up with are picking up groceries, doing yard work, some light housekeeping. Jenna, your daughter came over and cleaned our bathroom for us a few times, running errands, shopping for gifts. I had a couple of people who would take Lance shopping to go buy Christmas presents for me because he couldn't drive anymore, helping prepare meals, spending time with Lance because that gave him time to spend with somebody besides me. And then it gave me time to go do something else. So that benefited both of us. And then for a while we had a dog too. So I had people who would come over and take care of our dog, or they would clean up the backyard for me, take him to the groomers. And for a few years when I was still working, for a couple of years anyway, we had a friend who would take Lance to his appointments. So transportation. I mean, those are all things that were so helpful. Do you have anything else? I'm sure that there are a million other things that I could add to that list, but I mean, even as a single mom, were there things that would have been helpful to you, Jenna?
I think the transportation one was huge. One of the things that came up for me multiple times when my kids were young was I was having a baby multiple times. And having a baby is not the end of the world, but you're pretty sleep deprived and like your body just went through a really traumatic experience and you're trying to figure out this new human. And if it's not your first child, then there's likely another small child in the house. For me, it was, maybe a toddler or two toddlers. And that space of time until you kind of learn how to juggle those balls can be a little challenging. And that's when I would have people say, what can I do to help you? And what I needed was someone to do my dishes. I needed someone to come over and make lunch for my toddlers. And interestingly enough, there were multiple times I can remember that what people wanted to do was come over and hold the baby. And what would have been helpful to me is to have someone do my laundry or my dishes while I held my baby and sat on the couch, because that's what I wanted to do. But I would see the dishes or the laundry and feel guilty. And I didn't feel comfortable saying, would you come over and do my dishes so I can sit and hold my baby?
Do you think it would have helped if you had a list of things that you could use help with and that you showed it to these people who offered, and then they could choose from the list instead of saying, I'll come over and hold the baby?
Oh, absolutely. In hindsight, I wish that I had asked. I wish that I'd had a list. And I wish that I had been better at setting boundaries. By my fifth one, I was really good at saying, no, I'm holding my baby.
Learning how to ask for help, that takes practice. It really does, especially when you're used to doing everything yourself. So how did you finally learn how to do that?
I think I just out of sheer necessity. I was just exhausted and I had felt let down so many times. And the value of that time, that was the other thing. When you're watching your kids grow, you realize the value of that time you have with them when they're little, from the minute they're born. You just constantly see them growing, so you value that time and you don't take it for granted anymore. And so, if you if you continue to produce children as I did at such a breakneck pace, no, I really learned to value that time and go, I don't get this back, so
Yeah.
I don't care.
Yeah. And I felt like that with Lance too. All those years that I was caring for him, my house was a mess. All the areas that he lived in, that he used, those were clean, but there was clutter everywhere else. And people would come over and they would see that clutter. And I just got to the point where I didn't care because I didn't want to miss out on any time that I could spend with Lance. That mess was going to be there at some point. I was going to get to it. It was last on my list of priorities. And it was still there when Lance died, and I took care of it when he died. And as I was going through it, I was so thankful that I had let it pile up and that I had spent the time with Lance. So I would not change that.
Did, did you have the experience of people wanting to just come over and visit with him so you could get stuff done? Or was it mostly let me come over and help you with tasks so that you can sit with him?
I would say most of the time it was people wanted to come over and sit with him, but that was good for me because Lance really enjoyed people. He wanted that contact with people, and I didn't need that. So it filled a need for him, and it filled a need for me because there was somebody sitting there talking to him, and I could get up and I could go out and work in the garden or whatever it was. In the later years, it was nice to have people come and help me with things, work on things with me, or do things for me, because your kids did a lot of those things. And I really appreciated that. That was very helpful.
Well, it meant a lot to them too, and I think it taught them about a different life that they knew nothing about. And so they were exposed to something very unique. And I think it grew them and matured them and was fulfilling. And I think they took so much away from it. And I think they're better humans for it. So I was thankful that you allowed us into that space. It really was so impactful for them. So I'm glad that it helped you too, because I think as a mom, I couldn't teach them that stuff. So they got to learn from you, um, just that not everybody's life looks the same, and how to be in a space that you're not familiar with and overcome that discomfort of the unfamiliar and invest in something that's worthwhile.
I think at some point I would love to have your kids on to talk about their experience now that we're a few years past that and they're all mostly adults now. It would be really good to hear their perspective on that and share what they gained from it. So I think that that would be really cool. But anyway, well, I hope that this has been helpful for people. And thank you so much for joining me, Jenna. And I will see you next time.
All righty, we'll see you. Bye.